Hi everyone. Hi Ron.
Hello to everyone.
How are you?
I am okay, although that bell that began the class gave me terrifying flashbacks.
That can happen. School is a particular experience, I'd say, but not this school. This school is the good kind of school. All right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to our, I think, sixth Giano Academy talk. A couple of announcements first. Well, I'll introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm Giulia. I'm referent of Il Salotto di Giano's translation team. And usually you can find me acting as support for staff, guests, and participants at international events, like, for example, this one. um, Another announcement is if you want to support us, consider subbing to our channel. Now we can have subs. Thank you if you've already done it. And if you are Amazon Prime users, you can do it for free. So, um, what better way to spend your Prime subscription than with us? Um, if you sub to our channel, you will receive a link to our Telegram group. If you are Jano members, you will receive it in private. Otherwise, you will receive it in your Twitch DMs. So check them later. Now, Giano Academy Talk is our monthly live stream format where we talk about topics we usually cover in our classes at Giano Academy, Accademia del Gioco di Ruolo. It runs from September, more or less, to the end of the academic year, so around June, July. And we usually host guests, professionals, enthusiasts, people who know about RPG and who can share with us their experiences and their stories, such as Ron, for example. Today we have Ron Edwards, coordinator of our game design curriculum at Giano Academy, and secondarily, author of pretty awesome RPGs such as Sorcerer, Circle of Ants, and Troll Babe. Hello, Ron.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I hope that I can explain a little bit about what you mean about the value of learning together.
Yes.
And one of, may I begin? Or
Yes, of
I'm not
course.
sure if you finished
No,
your,
no. I've
okay.
finished everything, and
Okay,
now we can get to the point.
excellent. So I have not, to my face, been referred to as the coordinator of a curriculum before
But you are
for
now.
Giano. Apparently, I am. What this means is quite limited in some ways. There are many classes at Giano Academy, and the ones that I oversee are taught by myself. So they include one class, which is required for all the others. The others have no sequence, they're just take whatever you want if you have taken this class. So it's called, has a boring title, Introduction to Design. I would call it Phenomena if I had the choice, but then nobody would know that it's the first class. So anyway, but what is this about? Why is this presentation called Real Design from Real Play? It is because this class is about engaging with your own interests and your own skills that you already have. And so every class is a little bit different because we work together. I learn what the students are doing, I learn what they are about, what kind of what kind of games they have in their own backgrounds. And then the curriculum changes slightly as we go along because of that. So it becomes I say it's hands on because that's from me to you. I am finding out who you are and what you are working on. Um, Especially because I don't have this cabinet of secrets. I don't have it's not like you open it up and I say, okay, you're designing a game. I'll show you how to design a game. And you do this first, and then you do that first. And oh, if you want it to be more emotional, sprinkle in some emotional mechanics. And if you
You're
want it to
saying
be,
there is no handbook
I'm
of the
saying there
perfect
is
designer?
no handbook. There is no
Damn.
handbook. What this? Yes, I know it's terrible, isn't it? It's everybody just left, right? Everyone just forget it. He's not going to tell us how to
I know.
design a game.
No
Forget
handbook.
it. Well, in your experience, Julia, would you have worked with me on almost all of the
Yes.
presentations for this class? So, what have you found from people who come to the class and then they encounter some of our exercises, some of the work that we do? What sort of responses do you see by the end of the class?
Well, first thing I would like to say is I've never seen a student saying, I cannot do this, which, I mean, it might be a concern for somebody because when I go and try to do something new, I'm always afraid I might not, you know, understand or not be able to do it. And as you said, s- there are no designer secrets we can give them in this class. But the point is, I've seen at least, I don't know, I don't know, 10, 15, must be at least 20 people, and they all got to their design style in different ways. And this is the most fascinating thing, I think, that with the instruments you provided, they turned up entirely different things. And it was really fascinating because it was them. Each of these games in design was about the person that was producing them. It reflected their character and their ideas of how to play. And it was very, very exciting in a way because it means that there is no right way to design, but there
There are a
is,
lot of wrong ways,
yes,
but yeah. Mhm,
there are lots of wrong ways. And that
mhm,
is something we also learn during your
mhm.
classes, how not to do it the wrong way. But not having you should do this is a stimulus for everyone's creativity because I think primarily game design is creativity. So
Thank you so much. And I swear we didn't rehearse that answer. We did
no, we
not.
didn't.
That so I appreciate that greatly. Now, this may sound like a big claim that I'm making, and the only way that it can be done is with activity. So there are 5 meetings, 2 hours each. There's homework, same old homework. Everyone knows, not a happy word, but we do it. And then that shapes the what I see from the homework shapes the way we go into the next class. So let me give you an example of the third class meeting for the introduction to design class, just to show you what kind of ideas and interactions a class may have in it. This give me a moment to hit the buttons, and it makes me
Of
choose
course.
things and
In the
stuff.
meantime, hello Quest. Okay.
Should have come up.
Yes, here it is.
Excellent. All right. Well, this, as you can see, it's PowerPoint. And speaking as a former scientist, I hate PowerPoint for teaching and I rarely use it, but I've adapted it to this purpose. So, what you're seeing are more like signals and using things to use for ourselves. Okay, what's going on here? The students have played a couple of games as homework. They have tried a couple of things as homework. And then we are coming into this class, and I show them this slide you can see at the top called the scuffle, where all these different characters are trying to do terrible things to one another and knock over lanterns and kill each other with spells and all sorts of things like that. And then we are going to run it through several different systemic processes, a way one game might do it as opposed to the way another game might do it. And we actually do that together during the class. So therefore, this is an active kind of a laboratory approach rather than raw lecture. So everybody at this point, halfway through the class, has talking. We have run this scuffle a couple of different ways. And then we move into the ideas. As you can see further in the class, I start talking about two principles. One is called authorities, and the other has this terrible letters, I-E-E, but they are important features of play, important features of fictional content that apply to all role playing. What I demonstrate with the scuffle is that you can arrive at these things in different ways. That system actually does a thing. They are not just, you can do it this way or you can do it that way and it doesn't matter. It actually matters which way you do it. Let me click out of this. There.
Okay.
So one of the primary points of that's the third class out of 5. So it's kind of like the top of the mountain, right? We are getting up to the point where we can do this and make sense. Then armed with these instruments, then the ideas that students have already articulated suddenly take shape in their minds. Everybody already uses authorities and IIEE in order to play at all. So it's more about learning what you are already doing and saying, oh, that's how I've been doing it. That is how I have been taught. That is what I thought role playing was. But those are all things, these instruments can do these things in different ways. Then the next question is, well, what way would you like? Okay, this is why real design comes out of real play. The way different rules interact with one another can be productive or obstructive. It can either confirm our inspiration. We take our inspiration, we play, and then we look back and say, wow, look what we did with our inspiration. Or we pretend. We say, well, we played that thing, but playing itself was, we had to kind of keep screwing with it and keep ignoring it in order to actually pretend that we did it. And so this is not due to any single rule. It is due to the way multiple rules, multiple practices come together. So that means when you are designing, you must be playing. And one might say, oh, you mean playtesting? No, playtesting is for an industrial product. It is for commerce. It is for promotion. It is for advertising. It is for idiot proofing.
Don't use the
None of
word
these.
play testing with Ron. Don't use it. Don't.
You can do that when you are setting up some sort of product that you're going to wrap in plastic and send off to people, but that's your problem for later. I'm talking about whether, if you design a role-playing game, make it available to other people. I'm talking about whether, if you are hit by a truck tomorrow and your company disappears and is never heard of again, and no more copies are ever available of your game, will people be playing it 20 years from now and talking about it and referring to it as a point of reference to their other experiences of play? Does your game live on the strength of its enjoyability and its quality, its individualized quality? That's what I'm interested in. So scary as this sounds, I'm sure you are very interested in your success. That's wonderful. And I don't criticize it, but I don't care. I'm interested in the quality of your design. And the only way that will happen is as you continue to play in a playful fashion. You're not under a deadline. You are not under pressure to listen to your players as a design committee. You are not getting feedback on little forms. You are just playing. You might go backwards. You might say, oh, it wasn't so great this time. Why don't I get rid of that thing I put in. Or you might say, oh, well, if this works, now I can work on this other part, and we'll, jump ahead and play this other stuff for a while and see how that goes. It doesn't have to have a direction. Playful play, a lot of it, just as a continuing habit, is something that I am teaching through this class as well, which is very different from this high pressure consensus committee, constant input from opinionated people about what should be in there, and you got to have this and you must do that, and all this kind of thing, which invariably results in a broken and compromised game. Invariably.
Well, that's what
So,
happens when you put pressure on everything. Like you put something on, I don't know, a piece of wood. If it's too heavy, it breaks. And it's the same for games, I think.
well, let's think a little bit about the what the wood is supposed to be doing. If the wood's job is to bear a certain load at a certain, for a certain period of time or for a certain purpose, then we should play test it, right? We
Mhm.
should play test it and make sure that it works, whether it's raining or not, or whether, somebody misaligned it or something. How robust is this for its task? But we want that task to be done for that piece of wood the same way, to work as well as under so many different conditions as we can. That's what you do with a serviceable product. When I buy a can opener, I want it to open freaking cans. I want it to do it on Tuesdays. I want to do it on Saturdays. I want to do it, and I want my son to be able to do it, right? Two different people, and it will still open the can. Role-playing design is a completely different phenomenon. Here we are talking about making musical instruments. That's the best analogy, and it works. It's an excellent analogy. We are talking about people are going to use these things, and we cannot actually tell them what the music will be. Oh, you can tell them, but good luck. Go ahead and design a game. I will go running off into the woods with it and do something with it. You'll never see. And that's what you're making. The question is, what can this instrument do? Doesn't mean what will the song I make sound like. It will say, how does this instrument inform how I can make music? That's a very different phenomenon. And you are not going to get a good design if you focus on reproducible, idiot-proof results. It's not the same purpose for the piece of wood this time. And so there are certain requirements of usability. But what are they? Well, they are the requirements of play. What are the requirements of successful play? What makes successful play occur? Now, this is quite an interesting question about art versus science, as I see from our quester.
Yes, he says it's more an art than a science.
I
Yeah.
find that sometimes that phrase sometimes gets used as an excuse to be non-critical. Remember, I was a biology professor, and you are getting the attitude of a former science professor, teacher, and researcher here. And again, now if I was a commercial product maker, then I would be talking like I was criticizing about. That's not science, that's commerce. When we talk about science, we are talking instead about understanding the principles that underlie things, the things you cannot see. You cannot see my metabolism. You know what? I cannot feel my metabolism. I can feel my fatigue, but that's a neurological function at a much more superficial level. I cannot feel the metabolism in my cells, but that's why I'm alive. That's why I wanted to call this course Phenomena. I'm interested in those things which make play viable, even though we actually don't feel them during play. We may say things like, I rolled the dice. We may say things like, my character threw an axe at a guy and things like that. But what is operating among us so that this is possible and does not fall apart? So, for example, all my cells suddenly fail to metabolize and I would No surprise, stop talking right now, among other things. But we have all, I think, been in role playing situations where incomprehension among us, manipulations among us in some toxic cases, assumptions, innocent but non working assumptions, are brought into play. And what makes play not work? Is it just poor musicianship? No, what structurally can be present that causes problems rather than enables play? And you will find that it is not as easy as saying, well, if we just get to make up things and talk, that's more creative than if we count things and roll dice, right? I mean, counting things and roll dice, that's boring and mathy and stuff. And then talking is creative and all this crap. Okay, no, that is not the way that we break these things down into these superficial categories. That's like me talking about whether I am tired or energetic, but I think that has something to do with the energy in my cells. It does not. We need to get into the phenomena. So, in that sense, what I'm talking about is extremely scientific. It is not, however, engineering in the sense of a whole bunch of pre-built manuals that you just look stuff up in because someone has already figured everything out. And we are talking, and now the use of it is an art. So we are scientifically examining the phenomena that make instruments for the practice of art. That's how I think the art and the science go together usefully in terms that make sense. So if we talk then about where we would go, that is up to you. I think that even if somebody does not really think of themselves as a game designer, actually, you know what? That's better. I actually think none of us should think of ourselves as game designers. We should think of ourselves as role players, and some of us have a little problem, a habit, an uncontrollable urge.
Itch.
Yeah, yeah, inelegant but accurate. And so, if we if we examine that, then to leave the status, your self-identification, to leave player behind and say, no, I'm going to put on this designer hat and wear this designer coat. I took the course, right, from Giano Academy, so I get to, wear the coat and the hat. I am a designer now. Your games will be crap. And there is, at this time, 50 years and counting of evidence to support that point. That when somebody presumes themselves to be in the position of, for example, a film director or a novelist or a comic book artist or something like that, and they will make the thing, and then you zip it off, and all of these adoring fans will buy it. Your games are crap. It's a complete. It's like a light switch, right? Not a light dial, but a switch. And so I talk a lot about maintaining ourselves as players, practitioners, musicians, first and foremost. And then we use our experiences, we use the principles and phenomena that I talk about in the class and that we do exercises with. Instead of somebody sort of meticulously constructing a game design by the numbers with the ideas that I am providing, instead, they tend to wake up the next morning and say, let's try it this way. That's what, to me, I like most of it more than anything in the class, is when somebody shows up and says, well, that other thing that I showed you before, that's great, but I just worked on this morning. I just worked. You see how excited I got just thinking about this? I ripped my microphone out of my, okay. So you get so excited when the person comes in, and because they are excited, they say, I couldn't help it. I just wrote this. It's a page and a half. but they've got the idea in their head. They have the idea. There's the picture maybe that they found on the internet that sort of expresses kind of what they have in mind. They say it's not quite like this, but it's almost like that. And here, just a little bit of procedure, just how I want to do this one thing. I have this. If they just play, if they just play, those pages will multiply. Half of them will be crossed out as they go along and replaced by other things if they just play. And if they think about the phenomena, such as authorities, IIEE, and there are several others, 5 sessions, that's plenty of time, we can talk about the basics. So this game is about the most basic phenomena of role playing. And the diversity of this history, the diversity of possibilities cannot possibly be covered in that time. Julia, before I talk a little bit about the other classes, do we have first of all, any questions, or is it all just hellos and things?
For
Just to
now,
be sure.
hellos, but
Okay,
I don't
so
know.
hello, everybody.
If you want to ask a question, I'll keep my eyes on the chat and interrupt Ron without any mercy. So don't worry.
Right.
I'll just
Just to
okay.
let you know, that leads us to something I want to go over before I talk about the other classes,
Mm-hmm.
which is Julia's presence in class is as translator. The
Yes.
classes are conducted in English. Now, we often, not only are many students Italian, but we have students from many other countries as well. So
Yes.
it's getting to be quite, you know, quite
International.
diverse, quite international in there these days, which is just how I like it. I am speaking kind of quickly today, partly because this is unrehearsed, partly because I'm a little worried about time.
Don't
But
worry. We have time.
during class, I will be speaking much at this pace with these stopping points. And if I am the more important things, I actually go a little bit slower. This is because not only was I a professor for a long time, I was a student for a long time before that. And I have a special hate for instructors who go really slow on the boring things and then go really fast on the important ones. So I do the opposite, right? So the question I have, Julia, is as the translator, what? Oh, that reminds me. And she interrupts me and
Yes.
says,
I'm
you
the
know,
translator and the interrupter.
exactly. So, Julia, talk a little bit about your experiences with the classes and the students from that perspective.
Well, so we've had, yes, mainly Italian students, but also some people who are either bilingual or with maybe English or some French people. And I think, well, everybody didn't have, well, nobody really had trouble understanding too much. Sometimes they had problems expressing themselves. So what I used to do and what I will do next for next classes is to help translate. Maybe if they have questions or things they want to say, or if Ron says something particularly content dense. So I can translate both ways, from and into English, and also a bit of French, because I can do that as well. Um, Sometimes the so-called language barrier uh, is something of, um, you know, it's something that can discourage some people at first. And I've seen that in some students, but that mostly happened in the very first sessions, because after a while, both with my help and just by getting used to Ron's style of teaching, um, they they just started getting more confident, and they started talking by them without any help. And I don't know how to say this without it's sounding a bit more, a bit too, I don't know, self-absorbed or something. But I saw that when they didn't need my help anymore, they started, really letting loose, just, being themselves, because they were so into the material that they didn't need any help with language anymore. Not because their English was suddenly fantastic, but because um, the creativity part, um, this as Ron called it, this inspiration was so strong that language was just a vehicle, and it wasn't even needed for everything. Sometimes people use gestures or something, and I saw it wasn't really a problem at all.
One thing that helps a lot is that when Julia sees, especially, that somebody is hesitating or seems uncertain about whether they should talk or not, sometimes it's good just to encourage them to say whatever they want in, for example, Italian, and then that can be translated, and we can take the time. That's one
Mhm.
thing that's important in the atmosphere of our classes, is that if we need time for something, we should take it. I can always shrink something or expand it as needed as we go along. I'm not going to, tap my wrist and say, come on, we have this thing, we have a schedule to keep. Conceivably, I would, if we ever kind of got off track, got away
Mhm.
from what we were doing. But typically, I don't think I've had to do that. I think that we
I don't
have
think
enough
so.
expansion room in each little one. I know somebody is going to be interested in something enough that we will have to expand on it in that class. So that's built in. It makes for a more relaxed atmosphere, knowing that if you need to talk about something, you need to think about something, that we will take a little time for that. That is okay. With all of that said, let's talk a little bit about the other classes, because
Mhm.
I arrived at Giano Academy with 5 in mind, introduction and 4 others. And as of today, it has been a year now. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. As of
Right.
today, now I have 8.
Wow.
So yeah, so there's introduction, and then there are 7 more. Several have not been taught yet, and I'm very much looking forward to them. For those of you who didn't hear this, this is not a sequence. You don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After you take the introduction class, you can take any of them, and the order doesn't matter. They're quite different in their topics. One of them, for example, is it is still a design class, and it is still very activity oriented, but it involves a great deal of history. And this would be the class I taught recently called Three Fantasies. I'll share a screen of one of its lessons. And I have to find the little window. There we go. And allow.
Here it is. Okay.
Excellent. So this is one of the days from Three Fantasies where I discuss the phenomenon where Dungeons and Dragons, as a very amorphous concept, not any specific game system, but the concept of D&D as fantasy, became its own phenomenon. So you role played in order to do D&D fantasy. You read books that are like D&D fantasy that are written by gamers mostly, and then you end up with this kind of strange new phenomenon of its own. Fantasy itself ceases to be what it was before. It is encountered by a new generation as having this special content. And I talk about how this has happened historically, but we also talk about the design factors, so that we actually do design exercises in it. We examine the cycles of play that are inside it, and we look at what has happened to, for example, the early forms of RuneQuest or Rolemaster or any number of other games, we examine those in the 1970s when they first appear, and we discover that they are very much their own games. They are not Dungeons and Dragons. Then we look at them in the late 1980s, 15 years later, and we discover that all of them have turned into D&D fantasy. So this whole phenomenon of how this culturally became perceived as fantasy and not as anything to do with what fantasy was before, that's what this particular day is, a particular section or session is about. And how it is expressed specifically in terms of the procedures of play, the rules. So then, of course, you go off with your homework to adapt something into those assumptions of play. So that's an example of 3 fantasies. And then, and by the way, that class also tries to reconnect people with pre-gaming, pre-role-playing fantasy in its breadth and in its its power. I wasn't expecting. I was not sure what would happen in that class. I had no idea how those students would all become terrifying vehicles of pulp, psychedelic, and rock and roll fantasy in front of my eyes. It's what I wanted, but I didn't expect anything like that actually to really occur. So that course to me is kind of like, hard liquor. I didn't expect it to have that impact. So I'm very happy with it, and I'm looking forward to teaching it again. But it is not quite as technical. It has a lot of design and a lot of rules in it, but it is not quite as technical as something like Action in the Action, which is a class that I have not yet taught, and I'm really looking forward to it. So we have here a day from that class. Now, this is provisional, of course, because I haven't taught it yet. And one thing that happens to a class when it is being taught, it reshapes itself. So this is the preliminary.
Oh,
Lots of buttons.
it's a spoiler then.
It is a spoiler. And
well, it makes me kind of excited because it sounds really interesting.
well,
Here it is.
this one, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry, Julia.
this is so nice and red and very action. I don't know how to say it.
Well, the fun with this one is that I have spent a lot of time talking about these very fundamental phenomena of play. And I do it because what I really want to talk about is things like when you do and don't move around on little hexes, and when you do and don't roll to hit somebody, or instead, what if you roll dice very early in the sequence of a set of events, or what if you roll dice very late in the set of a sequence of events? What about less mathematical, less quantitative versions? How do you have, especially in circumstances of action, confrontational events with big consequences for characters and situations? How is this actually done? Why do different methods work, and what do they really mean? If we look, for example, at Tunnels and Trolls, and that's a cover from the 1970s, and then we run a sequence of characters in a confrontation, we look at these other basic forms, other games, all from the 1970s in this case, which actually invented these standards for role playing. That one in the middle, Melee, it's a little booklet, and if you have played, well, hundreds of role playing games, there are hundreds of role playing games who effectively slightly change a detail or two of Melee, and that's its combat system. So if you understand Melee, then you suddenly realize, oh, this is where all of these different things come from. If you think that only modern indie games have some sort of blanket role for a whole conflict, and then we talk our way through how this outcome occurred, then you haven't played Tunnels and Trolls from the 70s. That's how combat works in Tunnels and Trolls. So collective rolling for the whole group and different little options and possibilities for individual actions, and mostly retroactive narration for how it came out this way. That's not new. These principles of how you conduct action, most of them were set a long time ago. Incidentally, if you have played Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, 3.5, then we'll hop over to Pathfinder, 4th edition or 5th edition, you've been playing Melee. So this takes a look at the mechanics of movement and action. When do we determine where the characters have moved? Do we need to know that first or not? How much is this quantified in terms of a map? The only one of these games that uses an actual battle map is the one in the middle. Tunnels and Trolls doesn't do it. RuneQuest doesn't do it. And in case you're interested, early Dungeons and Dragons doesn't do it either. So we have all of these different mechanisms of space and time and options. If you move this much, are your options changed? If you look at how much of your options are shaped by a roll early in the process. All sorts of things like that. They are extremely different. So this is just the first day of Action in the Action, just to talk about movement and timing and the different ways these things can be organized, even and especially for games where you think you are just saying, oh, we will just talk about it. That's not true. There are procedures in action for how you talk about it. So looking at these early designs actually shows almost the entire range of what role-playing has done ever since. So that's just one day, and we get into lots more things later, including some fascinating math. Well, anyway, that's Action in the Action, an idea of what that game is like, or not that game, of that, what that phenomenon is like across many games. So stop that screen.
I think, I mean, this is the first time I see this, but I found it really interesting, especially doing it after introduction to design, because so many times, well, you have introduction and you start, you know, building your game, but even I'm not a game designer. I'm not even someone who has a game in design, but sometimes I get ideas, I'm starting to catch it.
You see, everybody needs to be like her, needs to be like Julia,
Starting
and you
to
do
catch it.
this, and you'll end up with a game in design after all.
Mm. And so many times I ask myself after the session, oh, but um, action is, let's say, the basis of a game, because if there is no action, there is no game. You're not doing anything. And but how? And I think this is, you know, something useful to learn how, especially if you're not somebody who's played for a very, very long time. Like me, I've only started, I don't know, uh, no, maybe 6 years ago is not a short time, but I haven't played for 20 years or something. So um, learning different processes, different how different games did it, I think it's very helpful for inspiration, for well, just to understand how it's done.
The technique that I show about diagramming systems has been very powerful in that regard, because it's something I
Yes.
can teach in the first class. This is not treating a whole game as just a bunch of algorithms that keep feeding into each other. It is, however, looking at smaller scale algorithms that occur at different times during a game, and the way that anything, activities feed into one another and then provide options or limit options. So it's a technique of diagramming that you'll learn in Introduction to Design. But then when we move into, for example, Three Fantasies, and I show the diagrammatic consequences in this obscure fantasy game from the 90s that is completely gone, completely unfindable. And you look at this and say, wow, in this game, you can actually decide how bad you're going to be, how far you're going to walk off this path of knightly virtue. You're a dragon knight. In this game, everybody can turn into a dragon from the very first beginning of play. And there are all these rules about setting up your mystic forces. That's the name of the game, in particular configurations. So you are managing your different mystic forces, and you can turn into this dragon, and it's very metal. But what if you deviate from this path of the virtues of the dragon knight, and you discover that when you do that, it closes off certain options, but it opens up other options? This is not evident from looking at the actual text of the game. You actually diagram the mechanisms of it, and you say, oh, look at what instrumentation is available. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted to go play Mystic Forces. Even though, looking at it as a product, it is one of the most amateurish, densely written, pretentious, completely lovable piece of, I don't know, it's extremely gamer, is all I can say. But when you recognize that whoever these people were, they were really playing. You don't get rules like that unless you were really playing and adjusting intuitively as you go. And what they have in there, buried beneath this mess of character options, buried beneath this mess of a long fantasy history, right, for their setting and stuff like that, buried in an overly beautiful cover and under and very, shall I say, loving but not skilled interior art, there's more game in there than you're probably going to find in the next thing you pledge for in Kickstarter. So understanding these phenomena, like the diagramming method, helps you actually enjoy and discover things. The more you enjoy, the more you discover. If you have the itch and if you are working on some game designs, those will get better. I do have a course about the exact process of designing without losing your way. And you were the translator for that course. That was the Ronnie's course.
Oh, yes. That
In
was a particularly cool course.
Thank you. I like that one a lot. It is very much a matter of discovering that you are capable of inspiration, that we are imaginative people, and we are communicative if we let ourselves. So what happens in that course of, I called it Fun with Ronnie's, but I think I'm just going to call it The Ronnie's. I think I like that better now. I'm changing the name. And it will show you effectively not just, okay, what are the mechanics for this game that I have in mind, that I have just invented in my mind, but what approach do I take? What is the personal process that will actually carry me through the continued design? What are the skills I need as a person toward other people? What are the skills I need as a designing thinker? And what are the skills I need in terms of play? So that before I know it, before some presumed deadline, before some notion of publishing, you don't even have to worry about publishing. You are looking at something that you are proud of. I have published several role-playing games, and I can tell you that there are some that I look at on the shelf, and I'm reasonably proud of them. But I know that piece in it doesn't work as well as I would want. I know that that particular explanation in it isn't as effective as I would want. I know that that section was badly laid out at the last minute and we had no choice except to put it out that way. As the years go by, that frustration, that sense of failure in those pieces does not go away. It gets worse. So, a great deal of the Fun with Ronnie's course is about how do you enter into a process of design where you don't have that feeling, where you can say that is what I discovered, what I wanted, but also what I discovered was best for what I wanted as I continued to play and continued to design. So that is actually a skill in and of itself, much better than a cabinet of secret techniques, moves. Use this move to make the players do that. Use that move to make them feel that. That kind of stuff isn't going to work.
Besides, this is better because it's theirs. I mean, this is yours. It's not somebody handing you something. It's you finding your process. And in that class, I saw people finding their process, or as you said before, starting work on a role playing game, and then saying, "Oh, but I thought of this other thing." And that is, it's not just creativity. It becomes um, how can I say, productive creativity? It sounds bad, but it's creativity
Expression.
generating more. It's, having children. And it's really, yeah, because if you think about it, it's just, I wouldn't even say multiplying because it's not the same thing. It's something else that is born of your experience with the thing you first worked on. So um, this is really a class that puts you into, let's say, in contact with your creativity.
Well,
Really, I really had fun.
the way put that way, it sounds like we all just get together and like, take off our shirts and put paint on each other, and I don't know,
I know.
find our spirit name or some crap like that, right?
No,
But
it's not
I
a
have to
hippie
say,
class, I
yeah,
swear. It's
oddly,
just me
well,
being romantic.
it's got a little hippie in there, but the main part actually is simply the willingness to try and to apply the things that are being presented to you, but you are the one who is applying them,
Yep.
not me. So let's see. There's introduction to design. I
Hmm.
mentioned action in the action, the Ronnies, and three fantasies,
Hmm.
and I promised actually 8 total. So what are the other 4? I won't go into them in detail, but they including ones that I'm still working on, not quite ready to teach, but soon. One class which is all about the math, numeracy. How do we use math as a language? And what does that mean in role playing? Why do I claim that every role playing game is a mathematical phenomenon? And you could say, we have no numbers and no dice. And I would say, real mathematicians laugh at numbers. They think, numbers are for, making change. Real mathematicians talk about other things. Those other things, that's what you're doing in those games. So learning genuine numeracy, the ability to speak math relative to role-playing practices, that's what that one is. So that's numeracy. Then there's one that I am about to teach next week, starting for the first time, one of my dream classes, which takes an exceptional role-playing game, something that's quite a phenomenon in the history of the hobby. Very tiny little set of pages thrown out from nowhere one night by a talented cartoonist called The Pool. And the whole class, it's called Playing with the Pool, is about what is this thing? What does it do? What do we learn from it? And then how do we apply those principles? So that's the pool I'm running. I'm losing my fingers here, unfortunately. Um, and I guess I might even. Here's a list. I should have had this list. Yes, I have another one I'm working on. Is called People and Play. And although it also has a very great deal to do with um, design phenomena, still it's kind of, remember how I talked about the phenomena, the metabolism, the physiology of play. What is it like when we do look at it from the people point of view? The things that we feel, the things that we touch, the things we say to each other, the activity of imagining and talking about it. What does design have to do with that? How does it interact with the different designs of role playing so that we generate events? It is what I think a lot of people would call the magic, but I hate that because I'm a scientist and it is not magic. This is a social creative thing that we, kind of talky primates do with one another. And so people and play is very much about what we get out of it as people, and the design phenomena that impacts that. So let's see. I think I talked about almost all of them. I am thinking of a couple of others as well. I think I've described 7, and then there are a few others that are in design that I'm not sure which one is best at this point. But as you can see, as I teach, I learn more about how to do it more effectively and in this venue and in these topics. And then I can think of a class about something that originally I don't think I would have been prepared. I don't think if you had said, oh, can you do a class on numeracy and role playing? I would have said, well, yes, but I don't think I can. I mean, I can conceive of such a class, but I don't know how to do it. Now, after a year of teaching these multiple classes multiple times, I have a better idea and I was able to whip up this big outline for how the class works. So, as an instructor, I am learning immensely from the students about what issues, what concerns, what assumptions, what needs, from my perspective, they may have. So that turns into more coursework, more ideas, more activities.
Yes, because sometimes when you do something for a while, start not remembering the struggles of when you first started. And I
That's true
guess
too. Yeah.
getting into contact with people who are starting out can serve as a sort of inspiration to actually, make new classes, or say this class needs, changing in
They
this
all do.
this
Yeah.
uh, well, they always do.
Mhm.
That's what happens when you teach. But here, I just wanted to read Quest's comment about math
Yeah, I
before,
saw
because
that.
it was
Yeah.
fun.
Hmm.
My math lecturer said that numbers are for accountants and solving problems is for mathematicians. And I think, in a way,
Hmm.
you solve a lot of problems when you're making a role playing game, aren't you?
In many ways, solving problems in the sense that you're providing means
Yes, exactly.
to of expression, and then the problems are those things that don't match, right, what you are getting at, or the means that you are seeking or feeling. Now, I like the concept, therefore, that the numbers are often, I mean, I get the joke about for accountants and for solving problems. I agree about that in many ways. However, the operations among numbers are like sentences. So addition, subtraction, equals, just to pick 3 of the most basic, um, they actually can be expressed verbally. And if we start bringing in strange things, um, such as set theory, factor analysis, well, there's there's a whole bunch of interesting things that I bring in as the course develops. But I would like to get across the point that in role playing, I don't think the role of numbers and mathematical sets and related things like that is a matter of representation. So, representation, a good example would be some number that indicates, you would might think, let's take an axe, right? Which I
Mhm.
actually have a section in the class about this. You take the axe from the first version of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I will give you all the metrics about the axe. There are a lot of them. How much it weighs, how much it costs, how much reach it has, right? How much damage it can do, how many times you can attack with it in a single round, and all sorts of things like that. And that's fine. And it looks very representative. It looks as though we must have a whole physics of an imagined world, and everything in it, if we chose, could be handled like that axe. And that play, therefore, is merely the collision of these different representations into one another. Now, that's not really actually the way it works. What matters is not the accuracy of the representations and then treating the operations themselves as though they are obvious. It's the other way around. You say, what are the operations in action? And those can be very different from game to game. What are the operations in action? And therefore, what are the units that need to go into it? And in some cases, you will find that that representation is very powerful toward that end. So that you will have a game with a lot of very representative mechanics, but not because the representation itself is the key to a successful game design, but because those are the right units for these particular operations. And what about the other mechanics in the game that aren't representative? How do you shift from the set of representation into the set of the non-representative? How do we translate the damage done by this axe into your character's increase in any capacity? Increased social status, increased strength, increased skill with an axe. That's the most literal one, but there are lots and lots of ways that characters increase or change. And yet there's a mathematical relationship with how much damage you did to that goblin that time and when those changes occur in your character. And it is not an indirect line. There is an operational phenomenon at work there. If that operation is what we care about for this game design, it feeds into our inspiration for wanting to play. It confirms our inspiration for wanting to play, then you are going to need things on either end of that operation that make sense to you. They may not be justified in terms of fictional logic. They may, however, they make sense to you in terms of how this character should change based on what they have done. What is that for this game, for your game, or for this game that you happen to be playing this time? That's the kind of math I am looking at. And sometimes numbers, therefore, are involved when they're required and not when they're not. So, some thoughts on that. Maybe a little boring.
Sometimes a
It's
bit scary for some people like me
oh,
who chose classics for to the classics high school. And but I think some people might be stopped by this by saying, "Oh my God, math!" But no, actually, I wouldn't
do
say
you
no. It's easy peasy, but
do you
I think
remember the scuffle? You've been through the scuffle a
yes,
couple of times, right?
yes, yes,
And you remember that ordering of the action is handled very differently in one version versus another,
yes,
which, right, and how we actually talk and what numbers go into it or don't. But the result is ordering. There is an entire branch of mathematics that is based not on magnitude, but on ordering
hmm
and Mariology, it's called. And learning how that actually works suddenly says, well, wait, my game has no numbers in it whatsoever, but we do that ordering math all the time. That's what my
anyway.
rules are actually invoking. And so, therefore, you may find that math as a language is a lot more fun than math as a professional
Process.
skill or a something you must simply demonstrate that you can, perform.
Yeah.
So that's what it's really about is math. That's why it's called numeracy. It matches to literacy.
Literacy. Yes.
So, any questions out there? I'm happy to
Oh, let's
consider them,
see.
or if I can't, I'll ask Julia.
Yes, English or Italian, both are fine.
Well, I was actually thinking of just giving you the hard questions.
Well, that is very nice. Very nice of you. Okay. I don't know if people are furiously typing and then erasing or something, or we were so clear
Hmm.
that there are no questions.
Well, we'll wait a little bit and see. In the as well, we could talk a little bit more
Mhm.
about the. Oh, go ahead.
Here, Kazamat. I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to pronounce, nicknames or something, but they say it's all clear. So
Oh goodness.
that's
Oh my
that's a
God.
good thing when you get to be
Okay.
so clear that. But I wanted to ask you. So you said you shouldn't consider yourself a game designer if you want to be a good game designer. So where, what is that moment when you wake up and you say, "Oh God, I have the hitch. I have that problem." So when is it that you realize?
Well, I think that a lot of it has to do with understanding some of the phenomena, the first class. And I think that we all know that we have very active brains that do things when we are not looking. And let's also keep something else in mind. Okay, I have here a role playing core book. And if you think I prepared this for this talk, you are wrong because where I sit right now, there is always a rando rule book
Like
sitting
you,
around.
you do this and you
Um,
find a rule book.
oh, yeah, I know. I could have just done this. I could have just. But anyway, exactly. But anyway, this is one that I was examining for reasons recently. It's called Providence, another one from the 90s that I think may not be well known. And one of the points that I am making here is say we were playing this game. That's the only reason I picked this up just now. Let's just say that you and me and this list of participants that I see in the chat are playing Providence. And these days, at the moment, I'm trying to play characters a lot rather than be a game master or any equivalent in any game. And so I would be playing a character, and someone else would be the game does have a game master, and so we would all be playing. Now, is it our responsibility to say these are the rules?
Well,
They're not the rules.
okay.
We will have played. We have finished a session of play, and there are things we learned from the game master perhaps explaining it to us. There are things that we have applied and they worked out in a particular way.
Mhm.
And the ones that we feel are right for us or that we understand perhaps, or, oh, so this is how we do it and we continue to use them. Those are the rules we used. Some of them may correspond to what we read or what was actually in there. Some of them we may have simply not understood and replaced them without knowing with things we have in here. Some of them we might have read them and tried them, and then halfway through that particular fight scene said, "Oh, forget it. Forget that part." and we continue. Others, who knows? Maybe there's whole portions in there where we needed some procedure and we filled it in. You may remember from the phenomena class how I showed that that happens, that people conduct game design at the table.
Yes.
And this is a big deal. Just for your information, as somebody who has published all these rule books of games, what I'm hoping is that when you read them, you find them attractive enough to use them as the rules. But there is no legal contract. I mean, if you don't do those, I can't sue you, or nobody at the table can sue you for malpractice. The insurance company won't, stop covering you because you deviated from the proper instructions.
You won't be fired from your job, but
Exactly.
because of that.
And so, therefore, the issue here is we're talking here now about whether a book is good. If the book is good and explains its procedures well, if you are inspired by those explanations, your choice to treat those texts as inspirational for your rules, that's your choice.
But
So,
says there is no
yeah,
tabletop RPG in
yeah.
law enforcement.
No, there is
But
not.
sometimes I think there should be.
Well, no, there depends on the laws we are talking about, the laws
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
and, and social activity,
You know,
yes.
we're,
But
we're
what
talking
will
about
those be?
people.
Right.
I'm talking about
But
people.
absolutely. But now we are dealing with the issues of procedure for actually getting this fiction rolling. So the point that I'm making is that to role play is, in many ways, to already be engaged in role playing design. And therefore, the tip simply to designing role playing is just a matter of introducing this into the picture, whether you write down what you do. And in many cases, that can lead to questions of, is that what I want to do? Or it can lead to questions of, well, let's do it this way and see how it goes next time. One can do this to such an extent that you will claim that you are playing Providence, or more likely other well-known titles. And you will suddenly discover that it's like the evolution of a martial art over many different schools and over the decades. And somebody comes in and you say, we study this martial art. And then the person realizes as they start to train with you that so frequently you say, but in our school, we do it a little differently. And a Martian could be forgiven from by when they look at your practices and they look at the practices of the past or perhaps of the place down the street, which is the same name, and say, excuse me, but those are different. And yet you will swear that you are a faithful practitioner, a loving, reverential, faithful practitioner of this game. You consider yourself a true user. You just happen to be doing it right.
That's true. I've played with people. I've played a few games with different people, and sometimes I was like, "Is this a different game?" Because this feels like a different game,
It often
and
very much
and it
is.
was.
Mhm. And so to recognize that this is occurring all the time, which is only what we would expect from a community better understood as musicians.
Yes.
It's only what we would expect. Knowing that that's going on all the time, and to recognize that therefore more formalized game design, the itch to actually formalize your own experiences, your notions, or your suggestions into some sort of thing that you will do in a dedicated way, really isn't very different from those people with their table where the the person brings, sure, the core rule book that they say that we're playing, but puts it on the table and never looks at it again, but instead opens up their binders, right, of all of their rewritten magic systems and their
Yeah.
maps and everything,
Yeah, but
and
I
kind
think
of
it should
looking
be
at,
done that way.
right, and you look at those binders and you say, I think that's the game we're playing, not that one, that you cart around. So I think that, therefore, I'm saying, in answer to your question, when do you know? And I'll say, oh, that train left the station a long time ago.
So there's hope for everyone, or I don't know, is it hope to be?
Well, I remember I didn't say it was a talent, and I didn't certainly didn't say it was an achievement.
It's
I think
something.
it's more like a personality disorder. You're just admitting, that it's when you admit you have the problem, right?
So you don't
Um,
wake up and say, "Whoa!" You woke up and say, "Damn,
Yeah, I know, I know. I
damn, I'm a
guess I
game
have to work on this
designer."
thing. Well, or someone says, well, honey, have you fixed the bathroom yet? And you say, I'm working on the magic system. I'm really busy.
The game design on the magic system of the,
And your
the
spouse
toilet. Yeah,
says, you're doing what? And you kind of have to say, it's more important to me than the
the
toilet.
toilet. All right.
That's right. See what I mean?
Yeah,
So, okay. I think that's actually quite exciting in its own way, if you're dealing with people who just try to have loving and supportive people surrounding you.
I think that's key, even just for the creative process. When you have to start playing your game, as you said many times, you need supportive people and not
Mhm.
people who say, but I think you should do it that way.
Yeah, let them design
You
their
do
own
it
game.
then. You do it then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Here's a pencil. So yes, that's definitely part of it as well. Okay, what else do we have in mind, Julia?
Well, uh, I just wanted to say that I've seen many students, and they were all different. They all did something in the end, whether they were um, more, I don't know, chatty. Can we say that? Or
Right.
a bit more withdrawn, a bit shyer, because as it doesn't look like it, but I'm a pretty shy person, and sometimes I say, oh, but what if I go do that and then I can't produce anything, and won't I feel bad? And I mean, there are people who start the courses by talking a great deal and, you know, um, saying things that help us all reflect on things. And other people who are just there quietly listening, but then everybody ends up being involved. And I think that's a great thing,
One
because
thing I
it's not
learned,
just,
yes, go ahead.
yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's not just uh, in the end creating uh, a game, but also some sort of sense of community between people who have the same disorder, and seeing
Right.
somebody like you, and seeing something, somebody loves me. Thank you.
hmm It's kind of
um,
nice to recognize that the love of what we're doing is real and can be discovered in others as well. So before I get too emotional about this, I will say that as an instructor, I am neither impressed nor non-impressed. Um, Philippe, appropriate, please, in the chat.
yeah, please.
Um, the the sense that you have, one moment. Right. The sense that you have to perform in a class as a student to impress the instructor or whatever um, doesn't really apply in these classes. So I can actually go all the way back into academia and talk to you a little bit about this. I have always despised the practice of awarding students more course credit um, because of how they acted in class, right? You know, participation bonuses and stuff like that. That just seems to me to be privileging one personality type over another, which I think is terrible, terrible practice. And also, I think the benefit of a class is not during the class. I think it's much later. I think it comes years later when somebody who had been, maybe even a little alienated during class and not ever felt like they fit in, or somebody who struggled with the material but improved toward the end or something like that. It's when they have gone on several years and then think about the class and then realize how much it may have meant to them, that there were things about it that made a lot of sense, that there were things a lot about it that led them to ask other questions. It's much later that a good course, I think, has its impact. That during the class, it's not like the movies, right, where the students all suddenly discover that they understand everything, and because the genius teacher, who happens to be played by a charismatic actor, um, that this sort of Hollywood dramatic course experience. That's not really my goal. It's true that we've had some really nice, heartwarming, or exciting moments in class here and there, which is great. You know, that's like dessert or bonus or, you know, nice. But ultimately, the goal of this course's design is for you to, a year later, say, I want to do this. And in the middle of play, even you're playing something for fun and you go, oh, this goes here. I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
The direct line from the class to that moment may be obvious or it may be very inobvious, but that's what I'm seeking, is for effects like that in the future. So that doesn't mean, so what that really means is being yourself in class. You don't have to talk if you don't want to.
Yeah.
I may ask you if you're interested. I may say, would you like to, what do you think of this? And you can say, well, I just want to listen. And that is okay. That's being a good student too. That's something I respect a lot.
All right. Any questions so far? Anything about, something about Ron's experience or about the courses we can answer? Because we only have a few minutes left. So if you want to ask some questions, ask him now. Here, Kazam Hatosh says, when your hobby becomes your work and you're happy every day, there is nothing better.
Well, hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically, yes. There are the question is, when we talk about work, what responsibilities do we mean? And that's actually, I think, kind of an important idea. I had, of course, my company Adapt Press in the States. My company is a new one. It's called Adapt Play now that I live here in Sweden. And I think that the most important aspect of this is that when you create responsibilities that detract from your play itself, when you have deadlines in mind, when you have budgets that must be met, um, to what extent those become destructive. Now, this is kind of a problem. I mean, I champion independent publishing. I think that if you're going to be publishing, that you need to maintain the control, and that when someone says, oh, we'll publish it, but we'll leave you all the control, yeah, until something really matters, then you'll see how much control you really have over, this work. But all that said, the first and most important question is whether and how you want to publish. You see, that's the thing. It's not like writing fiction. In writing fiction, you can call yourself a writer all you want, but the one thing anybody's ever going to ask is, what have you published? Do you make any money doing that? It's all commerce, it's all production. Role playing's not like that. Role playing design isn't like that. Those people with their binders who have never actually put all their work into one spot and called it, a game design. And if you say, oh, look, game design, they'll say, us? No, hell no, we play this game. They're more game designers than a lot of people out there, with their I'm not going to use words at the moment that will make everybody angry, but name your fashionable game template or syllables or initials that you want, and they have simply slapped together things underneath that label, and they are going to put a pretty cover on it, and then they're going to do a Kickstarter campaign for it, and they are going to call themselves game designers. I think that first group is more of the game designers. And in many ways, publishing is a deadly pit. I think you should. I would love you to publish because I want to play your games, but that's the only reason. I don't want you to destroy your life and destroy your enjoyment of play by it. And walking that line is not as easy as it looks, actually. So I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, they said clear, but it's not so easy as a person can think. Yeah,
Mm,
and that's true. Sometimes having
yeah,
work and hobby together can be jarring sometimes.
yeah, yeah. In some ways, I think my solution has been to play a lot more than I design. So that way, the play box, my activity, just as somebody who enjoys this activity, is bigger. And I think therefore it's not like the production is the big thing and then I play just to test my products. It's the other way around. I'm playing all these things and everything that I feel like or want, and then the design just sort of is a little, shall we say, safely contained disorder within it. Publishing, of course, is the severe form, if we want to look at it that way, right? It's the
Yeah.
design is sort of this urge or quirk, and then publishing is this, somebody better say, uh-oh, this
Oops.
now you need management, now you need the social support,
It's
now you
over.
need some. Yeah, well, it's not a disaster, but it's something that definitely needs to be critically managed. And that's I think very optional. I mean, I think that's the thing I would say more than anything. Publishing should remain an option rather than expectation. I mean, look at what it's done to fiction. What if fiction making? What if writing? I mean, I guess we make fiction in lots of ways, like role playing, but let's say writing, right? Actually, right? Another thing you can always find on my desk at random is whatever book I happen to be reading or rereading at the moment. This one, Realm of the Gods, right? There's magic stuff in this book.
Yeah.
And what if writing and reading these things wasn't defined by commerce? I can't even imagine it. All my knowledge of fiction as prose, written stuff that I read, all of it is in the context of commerce, even the fanfic, even the
Yeah.
free stuff on the internet. That is still considered a neighborhood or a suburb of, well, once I get into, once if I write enough. It's like that
Then
the
I will
one
get
person who
published.
wrote enough fanfic about Xena that she became the showrunner for the stories in the later seasons, right? I mean, that's the dream. What if it wasn't the dream? We are dealing with a medium in which that is the case. The production of the fiction is there because we want to, period. That's pretty cool.
All right. So if there are no more questions, I'll just we'll just say goodbye. And are there any more questions?
Oh, there's stuff I can't read there. Well, I can
Stream elements.
if I
Don't worry.
squint and like sound out words, I can actually get through a lot of italics, but
No, just stream
not fast.
elements.
Mhm.
Okay, so it looks like everything is clear. So if you think you're interested, definitely go and check out Ron's courses. They're starting next week. So you have to be quick because otherwise you won't be able to, you know, participate. But I think honestly, I've participated in a few classes now, actually a few courses, and honestly, whether you want to design a game, whether you're not sure, whether you have ideas like me, it's something really, really interesting. Even if you just really like playing and you say, oh, well,
That-
what can it be I'll just want to do it for academic purposes. It won't be for academic purposes.
oh no,
But
no, it's contagious.
Quest says, I just I
No,
just
no.
purchased the first one. Good
Thank
job,
you so
Quest.
much to the
So we'll be
quest. Thank you
seeing
so
you.
much.
We'll be seeing you soon. All right.
All right.
So before I say goodbye, I'll just remind you that our next live stream event is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on Aneta 94's channel. So we'll be seeing you tomorrow. We'll be talking. Actually, I think Laura. It will be Laura. She will be talking about Giano Academy. So tune in with Aneta and Laura tomorrow morning to hear about Giano Academy and what we do. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank
Thanks
you,
to
Ron.
everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for coming. Bye
See you
bye.
later.